by going around the room and just say your name, if you remember, and say in one sentence, what are you currently working on? And if you could frame it not in terms of, let's say, materials you're working on, but in terms of problem or question that interests you, that would be to your advantage. How about, I'll start with you.
I'm Cecilia. What was the other bit next time?
The other bit is what are you working on?
So I guess I have kind of two questions. One is how to show the apparatus of the thing that it is, and also how to approach that through gesture.
Great, really good. You see, that's how it needs to be done. And also tell us what course you are from?
BA Fine Art.
And you are now, it's 4D, isn't it?
Yeah, 4D stage 2.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
My name is Matilde and I'm working on fragmentation.
My name is Rupert and I'm working in drawing my various strands together in painting.
Strands of what?
Hi, my name is Lucrezia and I'm working on the absence of the object of desire.
Nice, nicely put.
And Marianne, I'm working on repetitions.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm working on playing cards.
I didn't hear the...
Playing cards, I'm working on
Playing cards. Is it like tarot or...
cards.
Yeah, but is it like tarot cards?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
About the feelings.
So is it about gambling or is it about divination?
No, divination.
Divination, okay, fantastic, thank you.
Hi, my name is Marta and I'm working on invisibility and our perception of reality.
Thank you.
Have fun. I'm working on data and the using infographics to present it.
How to present data? Did I hear you right?
Infographics.
I didn't hear, sorry.
Information, INFO, graphics, infographics.
Infographics, okay, got it. Thank you very much.
I'm Julia and I'm working on the visualization of the mirror neuron.
Okay. The visualization of
The mirror neuron.
mirror
Neuron.
neuron. Mirror neuron.
Do I have to explain?
No, you don't have to explain. It's just something. Something I never came across before, but that's fine. We might come back to that.
I am Michelle. Trying to figure out how to make my last install mobile.
Good. And what was your last install?
The one with Ben.
Oh yeah. How to make it mobile?
My name is Ben. I'm working on how to involve the audience with my artwork.
Good.
My name is Heather and I'm working on pairing up feelings with empty spaces.
Good.
Alex, I'm working on the impossibility of escaping technology.
Is there a possibility of escaping technology?
No.
Good answer.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm interested in transforming spaces into sort of alternate social realities.
Okay.
My name is Dario and I'm working on the threshold of classification of adult imagery.
Okay.
I am Catherine and I'm dealing with tension and the German word Zustand.
What is the word?
Zustand.
And what does it mean?
Like state.
State.
Yeah. But like state is equally what it is.
Oh, okay. State of matter. I was reading yesterday in a physics magazine that consciousness is a state of matter. I will send you a link if you remind me.
My name is Irene, and I am working in the disintegration of the purity of the human being.
Fantastic. Wow.
My name is Nora, and I'm working on camera's relation to the body.
Thank you.
I'm recently I'm interested in misreading of artworks.
Misreading of artworks. Nice. Thank you.
I'm Alexandra, I'm working on portrait.
Great, thank you. And in one word, in one sentence, what are you working on?
Okay. I'm Timo, and I'm currently working on my assessment essay, and I try to back up my initial idea with as many references as I can.
Okay, thank you. Who else arrived just now?
I'm Caro. I'm a bit confused, but I'm working on circular patterns, I guess.
Why?
Because I want to.
That's a good answer. That really is a good answer. Thank you. There was someone else who came in? Wasn't there someone else? Oh, where is Max?
He's right there.
Oh. Okay. So, those who just came in, if you can say your name and what are you working on in a sentence, please. Max, can I start with you?
So, my name is Natalia, and I'm working with the mythological aspect of the labyrinth.
Sorry?
I'm working with the mythological aspect of the labyrinth.
The mythological aspect of the labyrinth. Great, thank you very much. Max.
Hello, I'm Max, and I create a link between the death of the JPEG and the death of my grandfather.
The death of the JPEG
And the death
and the death
of
of your father?
grandfather.
Grandfather. Thank you very much. Okay, so we start the session now. So today we're going to look at a text that I find very interesting and inspiring, and it's also happened to be a text that is very often discussed. If you Google Gilles Deleuze, Postscript and Control Societies, you will find that there are thousands of websites and references of this particular text. Even people who never read anything of Deleuze often know this one little essay, and it's not even an essay, it is really like a postscript, so it's basically a footnote. It's basically a 3-page footnote, and this is the moment at which our discussion about digital life and the digital condition of humanity really gets real. As you remember last week, I told you we just laid down the foundation. When we look at the debate between Foucault and Chomsky, when we look at Foucault's notion of the panopticon, we just lay down the foundations. So now we can really get into this question of what makes our society digital and in what way being digital is actually different. That's where this conversation starts. There will be many threads from this discussion and from this text into your practice, and it's important that you keep, while reading, that you keep going back to what you are doing. I hope in the end of the session we'll have some time to kind of pinpoint some specific connections. I want to start from very briefly reminding you what we were doing last week. So we looked at a chapter from Michel Foucault, from a book that is called Discipline and Punish. And this chapter is called Panopticism. Now, panopticism, as we discussed, is the meaning of the word panoptic, or the panopticon, means to see all, or all-seeing system, or a method of government or of governance that is based on surveillance, on seeing everything. And if you remember, Foucault have shown that in the modern era, which we roughly describe as the period that begins from, let's say, the 17th century onwards, the way by which the population is controlled is changing. Yeah? So the previous era, which again very broadly can be called the Middle Ages, the main system, the form of control or discipline or power was executed through punishment and through making punishment visible, horrific, memorable, and in that way obedience and loyalty were ensured. And Foucault is saying this way that, you know, for us, we just think of Braveheart, of the torture scene in Braveheart, if you want to have a visual image of what this form looks like. And Foucault is saying the move from the Middle Ages to modernity happens in all fields of life. It happens in terms of industry and economics and political freedoms and medicine, and also in the field of governance. And in the modern age, it is not, for various reasons which we will mention, this form of governance through punishment, torture, the Inquisition. Yeah? Yeah? This way of governing or ensuring loyalty or obedience is not working for various reasons. Maybe it's not efficient enough. Maybe there are just too many people and you cannot torture or punish that many. Maybe it is just not fitting the current ideas of what should be the relationship between the power and the people. Maybe also the aims of power are now different. But for a number of reasons, the shift is from punishment to discipline. And the modern era, Foucault calls the disciplinary society. It's a society that does not make a spectacle of punishment. It's a society that ensures loyalty and appropriate behavior essentially through models of surveillance and discipline. And the ultimate template for this model can be found in many areas. In the way the prison is organized, when there is a single guard that surveys all the prisoners on the prison floor, or a hospital ward where the nurse surveys all the patient beds, or the classroom where the teacher surveys all the students, or the barracks where the drill sergeant surveys all the soldiers on their bunk beds. The model of surveillance is persistent and exists in all these areas in a very similar way. So that's what Foucault described, and that's what he called the disciplinary society. Okay, that's what we looked at last week. We also, I just briefly remind you, we also looked at these short videos by Isabella Rossellini, the green porno videos, because we wanted to explore with Rossellini and Foucault how power operates outside the familiar and easily identifiable institutions of power. Because one of Foucault's central arguments is that power or control are exercised not only when it is visibly manifest, such as police, army, the government, the court of law, but also, and more importantly, power is exercised in invisible, innocuous, very innocent forms, such as the doctor's clinic, or the psychiatrist's couch, or the children television program. All these innocuous institutions that allegedly are really there simply to improve, educate, entertain, heal, they are also coercive and disciplinary institutions. So that's how we kind of, these are the points we touched upon last week. Any questions about what we've done a week ago? Okay, so, and now we have this essay by Deleuze, Gilles Deleuze, who was a close, well, friend, I'm not sure, but Deleuze and Foucault are definitely allies. They belong to the same historical period. They both came to prominence as philosophers after the student revolts of 1968 and 1967. They both published their big books in the 70s. They collaborated a number of times. There are a couple of interviews they gave together. Foucault wrote the introduction to Anti-Oedipus that we read in the previous semester. Deleuze wrote a very lovely book on Foucault. It's called Foucault. However, in this essay, you will see that Deleuze is taking a particular position towards Foucault's notion of the panopticon that we're going to explore. To put it very succinctly, Foucault basically says, Deleuze is saying, Foucault was absolutely right to identify the age of modernity as the age of surveillance and discipline. However, the age of modernity is now over. We enter another age, which we might want to call the post-modernity, or digital, which is the same thing. And in this age, surveillance stops working and performing its function in the same way that punishment and torture and inquisition stopped being effective in the age of the Middle Ages, or feudalism. Yeah? So the historical period of the Middle Ages was replaced by modernity, but the historical period of modernity is also being replaced by something else. We are now exactly at this hinge of replacement. Being in the hinge is a very strange place to occupy because you still carry the templates and the understandings of the old era. You try to make sense of what is coming with these old ways of thinking, and they don't quite work. And they land you into trouble because you basically try to open the door with the old key. The key, the lock was changed. You still have the old key, the door doesn't open. Yeah? And it's not the problem. The problem is the key. You need to have a different key. So one way to understand what Deleuze is doing here is trying to give us a key or a set of tools with which to unlock this new era. But the most radical suggestion that is coming out of this text is that, times are changing. And not only times are changing, institutions are changing, systems are changing, and that also means that how you fight, how you make art, how you make love, how you work, all these things change as well. And the question then becomes, what are the new weapons? What are the new tools with which you can survive, serve, strive, play in this new historical moment?
But doesn't it always change?
Does it always change?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Like something stops and then something new
That's
comes,
right.
and I mean, just change. There's always change.
That there is always change, this is correct. But change always happens, but it happens at different, sorry?
Period of time.
Exactly, it happens at different tempos. Some things change very rapidly, yet something change very slowly. For instance, geological changes are very, very slow. They can take thousands of years. Climatic changes can take hundreds of years, sometimes tens of years, sometimes even faster, you know. Changes in human society can be either very quick or very slow. For instance, the family as an institution being around for a very long time. We can now see the notion of the family, or the notion of marriage as an institution changing. Not quite completely, because the Anglican Church recently decided that as much as they would like to allow gay marriage, they reluctantly still cannot do that. But there are changes on different scales. Now, changes in the systems of governance are not very rapid. Yeah, they are. So, for instance, the system of the feudal system of government through, you know, the lordship and can you see me? Yeah, the lordship and the vassals and the serfs. This system was carrying on for more than 1,000 years, more or less in the same formation. Even though, if you look at a good historian of the Middle Ages, such as the fantastic and wonderful Mark Bloch, B-L-O-C-H, he identifies many changes and shifts within the feudal society. His book is called The Feudal Society. But then, yes?
Maybe we're talking here in the changed state of things. Maybe in the sense of like the boiling and not boiling water. Like there's always change in the temperature. It happens in every moment. But then at one certain point, the state of the water changes. And that is maybe the change also from modernity to postmodernity.
I was thinking when you were talking, like there's some kind of point where maybe people just realizing the changes, whatever those were.
I think it's more about a labeling system. Like
yeah, maybe so.
Once a lot of these changes all sort of line up, and it creates like a new structure. That once it's made enough change, then they can put a new label on it.
Yeah, and then you got it, and then you can talk about the changes before you can.
I think you are asking a really important question, which we come back to it over and over again, because this is also the key question for an artist: how change happens. At what point a change can occur? This is the key political question as well. And I think Dario is absolutely right and the example of the water is an excellent one. There are some moments when change intensifies, and from a gradual quantitative change, it becomes a qualitative change. Yeah. So there was this philosopher of science, Thomas Kuhn, K-U-H-N, Thomas Kuhn, and he wrote about the scientific revolutions. And he introduced a concept which you are probably familiar with, and the concept is paradigm shift. Yeah? So, he says in science, what happens is that for a very long time people work within the same model. For instance, there was the Newtonian model. Yeah? The Newtonian model of physics persisted for around 250 years. There were changes, there were advances, but the same basic rules governed science. And then what happens? Then a lot of small changes come together, and then you have a paradigm shift. And suddenly, Newtonian laws are not the be-all and end-all. You also had to have Maxwell's equations, and you have quantum physics and quantum mechanics, and hopla, there is a paradigm shift, and there is a different science. Yeah? So, I guess one way to explain what Deleuze is trying to say here, and that was a very good observation, Marianne, is that this is a moment of a paradigm shift. We're not talking about small changes that just change the landscape bit by bit. We talk about a moment when there is a certain accumulation and a massive shift, a radical shift, a revolution, if you like. Okay. Let's see. It's a very short text. We probably will be, yes.
But wouldn't, and it might seem like a stupid question, but wouldn't the change actually occur only if we identify it, only if we witness the change?
Say it again?
Wouldn't the change actually occur when we identify it, when we witness the change? If we don't see it, if we don't recognize that something has changed, we would not be able to know, like, basically for change to occur, critical mass of people need to have observed, right? To say that, okay, something has shifted, like the sense of the water boiling.
Yeah.
You have to observe that the water is now boiling. If you don't know that this is the state of water after it's reached a certain temperature, if you do not possess that knowledge, if you do not know that what that change is, would that still then be a shift?
Well,
how many people do you need to have in order for that to be a shift?
Also, how many people need to identify that it is a shift?
Look, here we have a sheet of paper, and we start to bend it, and we bend it, and we bend it, and we bend it, and we gradually bend it, and bend it, and bend it, and bend it, and at some point, it breaks. Yeah? Now, the movement of my hands was all the time the same. And it was gradually bending, but at some point, this same movement caused an intensive change, a rupture. Why? I mean, in terms of my hands moving, it was all the time the same gradual movement, but at some point, rupture happened.
The way we know that it ruptured is because we observed it, right? If we did not observe it.
Are you talking about if a tree is falling in the forest?
Yeah, it's all the same.
Well, I'm not sure that is relevant here, because we talk here about changes in human society. So, the question of the observer is kind of slightly irrelevant, because it is about what happens to the observer. We are the trees. And we are also the forest.
Yeah, but a lot of these changes would have, because someone observed, how do I say this? A lot of these changes start off by not being visible to the naked eye.
Correct.
It's unless they reach a critical mass, unless they reach some sort of traction, and a group of people then observe the same phenomenon over and over again, is when you start identifying, saying, okay, there is a change happening. Until that point, is it as much as a change it is as when it becomes a paradigm shift?
But thousands and thousands years ago, when no human were in the earth, changing didn't happen.
That's exactly what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah,
It's when we observe is that it's happening, right?
So,
At what
no,
if-
but they happen even if you don't
It's
observe.
happening even if
So
you are
how?
not
You would not know. You would not have that knowledge.
But you don't have to know necessarily.
Do you
The
feel?
USA were there, and no European didn't know, but they were there. And changing were happening. The mountain, the water were changing. In the universe, planets are having changing, and you don't know.
No.
Let's see,
When
let-
it comes
let's-
to observing change in
Why
society.
you relate changing
No,
to
with
observing?
society. It's not just like the world changing.
But-
It's mostly about with society.
But the change is a change, or it's a change of a society.
So it's a
or-
change. It's a change only when you observe it, or is it still? I don't know how to. Theoretically, it should happen without
But-
whether we observe it or not.
No. I mean, there is a question of whether there are events which are observer independent. I have things to say about it, but that is not the question that we are dealing with now, because the things that Deleuze is talking about in terms of the changes that happen in society at the moment when the age of modernity is coming to an end, they are observable. Yeah, and not only they're observable, they happen to us. Yeah, we are the ones to whom these changes happen. Yeah. Now, it's true that you need a philosopher, or a poet, or an artist, which is all the same thing, to sometimes clarify and crystallize this experience and show all of us the change that already is happening to us. Because it's true that we can be, we are so busy in our day-to-day, in buying an oyster card here and a pint of milk there and taking the children to school, that we don't notice. That's why we need people like you who go into their studios and spend these agonizing hours staring into the canvas and into the computer or into their own soul, and then making something about it, about this very change. So it's true that these changes can be hard to notice, but that's why we go to Deleuze, because this is my suggestion. He did notice them. Yes.
But also, I think the thing that you were saying, that change just happened to certain people because other people is building in this new era. So they don't have knowledge, they don't have notion of our previous era, and they are just living into this time with this.
I didn't understand. Can you say it again?
For instance, this changing, just few people can notice this because other people are building this new era, new age. Thank you.
I think, guys, we need to look at the text. I think the text actually answers these questions, keep them, and let's see in about an hour if they remain unanswered. Because I think that's precisely what Deleuze is dealing with. Could someone, and I'm not trying to avoid your questions, I think they are important. This is a 3-page text. I think that Deleuze did engage with these questions of how change exactly is happening, and he gives some very specific examples. Could someone read to us the first paragraph? Bishop, please. Thank you.
Foucault located the disciplinary societies in the 18th and 19th centuries. They reached their height at the outset of the 20th. They initiate the organization of vast spaces of enclosure. The individual never ceases passing from one closed environment to another, each having its own laws. First, the family, then the school, you are no longer in a family. Then the barracks, you are no longer at school. Then the factory, from time to time the hospital, possibly the prison, the preeminent instance of the enclosed environment. It's the prison that serves as the analogical model. At the sight of some laborers, the heroine of Rossellini's Europa 51 could exclaim, "I thought I was seeing convicts."
Thank you. Okay. What Deleuze here is referring to? What the paragraph is talking about?
Panopticon? The panopticon?
Yes, the disciplinary society. So Foucault spoke about the disciplinary societies that we discussed last week at length. And you remember how there was this sentence we read that ends the chapter of the Panopticon, in which Foucault is saying, is there any wonder that the prison resembles the hospital, resembles the school, resembles the barracks, resembles the factory, that still resembles the prison? So everything, the whole of society, that was Foucault's provocative remark. The whole of society, the whole of modern society is based on the model of the prison. Yeah. Now, if you're going to be annoyed with anything, be annoyed with that, because what he's saying, Foucault, is that our social sphere, all of it, is organized on the model of the prison. Yeah? So even if you are not in prison, Foucault is saying you are still kind of in a prison-inspired environment, because fundamentally the school, the family, the factory, the hospital are all based on the same model. Yeah? That is the real provocation. Yeah? So if you want to have an argument, that is the thing to argue, you know? Because you might want to kind of say, no, we live in a free society. You know, it is not a prison. The prison is over there in the Eastern Bloc, in Russia or in China. We are living in the West. You know, we have our Western values. And Foucault is saying, well, let's take a look at these values. These values are based on observation, on surveillance, on discipline. And the heroine of Rossellini's film, Europa 51, could exclaim, when she looks at some laborers, some people going to the factory, she can say, they look like prisoners, they look like convicts. Yeah? So just a little illustration of this notion that the laborers walking to the factory, all in their sort of uniforms, they look like and they behave like convicts going to, let's say, the site of hard labor. Yeah, they also look like children trotting along, going to school. And I live in near Hyde Park, and sometimes you see them, you know, the little kids in their grey suits with the little shoes, with the little ties, going, you know, in sort of rows, and next to them, in the Hyde Park, another bunch of kids, but 15 years older than them, in the military uniforms, doing similar kind of marching there in the sandpit, learning how to do the left turn and the right turn. And you see, it's exactly the same model. You know, from very young age, you learn how to walk in pairs or in streets, how not to break step, how to follow each other in line. You take this knowledge with you to the army, then you take this knowledge with you when you go to work. So that is the kind of mindset that Foucault was dealing with, this mindset of discipline, of subordination. Does it make sense? Okay. So, Vishal, can you carry on?
Foucault has brilliantly analyzed the ideal project these environments of enclosure, particularly visible within the factory, to concentrate, to distribute in space, to order in time, to compose a productive force within the dimension of space-time whose effect will be greater than the sum of its component forces. But what Foucault recognized as well as the transience of this model, it succeeded that of the societies of sovereignty, the goal and functions of which were something quite different. To tax rather than to organize production, to rule on debt rather than to administer life. The transition took place over time, and Napoleon seemed to effect a large-scale conversion from one society to the other. But in their turn, the disciplines underwent a crisis to the benefit of new forces that were gradually instituted and which accelerated after World War II. A disciplinary society was what we already no longer were, what we had ceased to be.
Okay, thank you. So what is being said in this section? We discussed it a little bit last time. So Foucault recognized the transience of this model, this disciplinary society model that Foucault brilliantly analyzed, as Deleuze is saying. The disciplinary society that is exemplified by the factory. Why? Because the industrial age, or the age of modernity, and what period are we talking about when we talk about the age of modernity? What period are we talking about? When we say modernity, what do we mean? Historically.
Industrial revolution?
Roughly, yeah, good. So starting, well, if you talk about the Industrial Revolution, you probably will start from the end of the 18th century, or the beginning of the 19th. If you talk about the Scientific Revolution, you will start from the mid-17th century. But very broadly, we paint in very broad brushstrokes at the moment. Very broadly, the age of modernity, the end of the 17th century, yeah, up to, let's say, the end of the Second World War, maybe a little bit into that, yeah. So, in their turn, the disciplines underwent a crisis to the benefit of new forces that were gradually instituted and which accelerated after World War II. A disciplinary society was what we already no longer were. Yeah? So Deleuze is saying Foucault's analysis was brilliant, but it dealt with a period that is already coming to an end. This disciplinary period, the age of the factory, yeah, because there are economic reasons for the form of control, the form of disciplinary control. The industrial society, the society of modernity, was based on production. Yeah, as you know, one of the main signifiers of the modern age is that people move in their masses from villages to the cities. And what people do when they move to the cities, they start to work in factories. And when they work in factories, it's because they produce. So that the wealth of the country is built on manufacturing, on production, whether it is steel or cars or cotton, it is about production. For production, you need labor. Labor needs to be organized and disciplined. You want to avoid sabotage, you want to avoid strikes, you want to ensure that people are standing next to their machines and working. Have you seen Charlie Chaplin's films? Yeah? Have you seen, so what is the film with the factory? Modern Times. Yeah, have you seen Modern Times?
Yeah.
This is it. Modern Times, modernity. You are a cognate machine. You are the machine. Yeah, go and see it again. It's a fantastic film. Okay, but Deleuze is saying this age of the machine, or there were some people here who mentioned the apparatus. You just talk about the apparatus. Yeah, the age of this machine is coming to an end. Something else is taking its place. Okay. Now, Rupert, could you read to us from this paragraph? It's the third one.
We are in a generalized crisis in relation to all the environments of enclosure: prison, hospital, factory, school, family. The family is an interior in crisis like all the other interiors: scholarly, professional, etc. Administrations in charge never cease announcing supposedly necessary reforms. The reform schools, the reform industries, hospitals, the armed forces, prisons.
Thank you. That's it. So Deleuze is saying this model that worked so well for modernity, it was based on discipline and production, is coming to an end. Everything is gradually being reformed. And he draws our attention to this continuous need to reform, and also to the fact that the family is just as much a disciplinary unit like all others, the scholarly or the professional. We're going to move. Yeah, there's some really nice stuff here. Let's carry on. But everyone
knows that these institutions are finished.
Okay, what institutions are finished?
Industrial hospitals, prisons, schools.
Family? Finished. Good. Yes, all these institutions, the family, the school, the army, the hospital, they're finished. Is it right? Is it true? What do you think? How do you know? What can you observe? What evidence can you bring?
The existence of all of them right now.
What happens to the army, for instance? For instance, I will give you an example. You might know that we are now fighting a war in Syria. Yeah? Do we have any army there?
Drones.
There is no army, the drones. They are operated from Sari. Yeah? It's a remote control war. It's a war, it's war by joystick. So it's not an army as such. And in the foreseeable future, when people will talk about boots on the ground, there will be robot boots on the ground. Yeah, the soldiers will be replaced by robots. And what is happening to the family? Is it the same family?
No.
Well, the family is changing. You can have a single parent family, you can have same-sex family. So the whole notion of the family as a very fixed institution is changing. The notion of the nuclear family, mother, father, 2.25 children, that was already a change from the more traditional extended family, when you had 3 or 4 generations living in the same house, when the grandparents looked after the children, and the grandparents were sort of respected by the whole family, and kind of gradually fading away, it's all kind of over. People get outsourced to the old people home at a certain point. And so even this notion of the traditional extended family was replaced by the nuclear family, but even the nuclear family is not what it used to be. Let's carry on a little bit. It is only a matter of administering their last rites.
It's only a matter of administering the last rites and of keeping people employed until the installation of the new forces knocking at the door.
This is a great sentence. Yes, carry on, please.
These are the societies of control, which are in the process of becoming a disciplinary society. Control is the name Burroughs proposes as a term for the new monster, one that Foucault recognises as our immediate future.
Okay, stop here for a second, because I want to just move a little bit forward, and if you can start from there is no need here.
There is no need here to invoke the extraordinary pharmaceutical productions, the molecular engineering, the genetic manipulations, although these are slated to enter into the new process. There is no need to ask which is the toughest or most tolerable regime, for it's within each of them that liberating and enslaving forces confront one another. For example, in the crisis of the hospital as environmental enclosure, neighbourhood clinics, hospices and daycare could at first express new freedom, but they could participate as well in mechanisms of control that are equal to the harshest of confinements. There is no need to fear or hope, but only to look for
Okay, what did you hear in this last section? What did you hear? What about the example of the hospital? How Deleuze is dealing with the example of the hospital?
Well, it's been dispersed or...
The hospital is being replaced by what?
Clinics.
Sorry?
Clinics.
Clinics, yeah. So there is, in the past, Deleuze is saying, you went to the hospital, you stayed there, you had an operation, you recuperated, and then when you got well, you got home, or if you didn't get well, you were sent to the morgue. But now you have all this system of kind of half houses. So I don't know if you've been to the hospital lately, but they discharge you after a surgery practically the next day, and they send you to recuperate at home, and they might send a nurse to visit you, once or twice. And you might say, well, isn't that kind of great, because it's nicer to be at home than in the hospital, and on some level, of course, it is great. On another level, suddenly your home becomes a site for the medical authority to intervene. So the nurse is coming to your house, they can take a good look around, they might not like what they see, they might report you to the social services. Your home now is a kind of extension of the hospital. And then there are all these additional services like what they're called.
Online appointments. For instance,
online
you can
appointment.
receive your appointment with your doctor through internet, and they can give you the prescription diagnosis.
Yeah, not only online appointments, you also can get kind of online diagnosis. You can call 111 and they will.
They say like in the future we like using virtual reality, so a doctor can see you through virtual reality.
That's right, yeah. Doctors, I was reading yesterday, doctors now diagnose on Facebook. Yeah, I mean, that is something that Deleuze obviously is not touching. When this text was written, by the way?
1990.
Yes. Is it 1990? 1990. It was translated to English 92. It was published by originally in French by 1990. Yeah. So that was long before Facebook or social media. But philosophers and artists, they have a very they're very long-sighted. They can look far ahead. So now you have systems of daycare, you have meals on wheels, you have hospices, you have old people homes, and that's okay, that's fine, just come in. So the hospital is changing from the single institution that was based on, as we discussed, this nurse, the ward nurse, surveying the 8 patients in the ward, the 8 beds, or something like that. The system now is much more modular, much more fluid. Yeah? So you spend a night or two in the ward, then you go to the daycare center, then you go home, and you get some visits, then you maybe go to a physiotherapy center that will be somewhere else. And you might go for some operations, you might go surgeries, you might go to a polyclinic. So the centralized notion of the hospital is changing into something else. And it's important to know that Deleuze is saying there is no need to ask which is the toughest or more tolerable. The question is not whether it is better or worse. Don't get trapped in these fake moral dilemmas. Yeah? Because it says the forces, liberating forces and enslaving forces are present equally in the system of the hospital and in the current modular system. Yeah? The forces of liberation and enslavement always fight against each other. And the key line that really, if you're just going to take one sentence with you from this essay, it is this: there is no need to fear or hope, but only to look for new weapons. Which means it's not a question whether it is better or worse. The question is, how do you fight? What are your tools? What are your weapons? Yeah, it basically means, it's a call to arms. It says, don't be complacent. Don't think that the tools you were given in school, that you were taught, that you acquired, that they're going to help you along your struggles. You need to look for the new weapons. You need to find the new keys. Okay. Section 2, logic. First section was historical. Okay. So you start to get the sense that we are living at this moment of shift. Cultural, social, political shift, change. It is colossal in its scope, but as I think Gilles was saying, it also can be imperceptible. Yeah? Why? Because many rhetorical devices, many facades tend to remain the same. Let's have a look. Anyone else wants to read to us a bit? Someone read from this part of the room? Can you read? Start from the different.
The different increments or space of enclosure through which the individual passes are independent variables. Each time one is supposed to start from zero, and although a common language for all these places exists, it is analogical. On the other hand, the different control mechanisms are inseparable variations, forming a system of variable geometries, a language of which is numerical, which doesn't necessarily mean binary. Enclosures are molds, distinct castings, but controls are a modulation, like a self-deforming cast that will continuously change from one moment to the other, or like a sieve whose mesh will transmute from point to point.
Okay, pause here for a second, because I think that really deserves a bit of clarification and discussion. So, Deleuze is saying the age of modernity was the age of systems of enclosure. What systems of enclosure? Well, hospital is one. We just discussed the hospital. So hospital was this monolithic system of enclosure. All the services to do with maintaining the body were provided in this one location. It really was the enclosure of the diseased, of the pathologized body. Okay? Now, this is, he says, an analogical model. This is very interesting because we're talking here about a move from analogical to digital. Now, so far we discussed it in the example of the hospital. And it's quite important to understand what is the meaning of digital and analog here. What is digital? Digital, as Deleuze is saying, doesn't necessarily mean binary, but it means numerical. What are numbers? What are numbers? Numbers are discrete units. Sorry?
Quantitative information.
Good, yes. Numbers are discrete units. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah? So, when you talk about something analogical, you talk about something linear and continuous. Analog photography, you familiar with this concept, this term? Analog photography. Now, it's quite a recent term because, believe me that...
Not necessarily linear.
One second. We'll come to that. When Daguerre or Fox Talbot discussed their discovery of photography, so guess what? I discovered analog photography. Yes, it only became analog at the moment when it stopped being analog. You get it? Yeah? It's only from the point of the digital that you can look back and say, oh, actually, that was analog. We didn't realize that we were doing analog photography all this time. But what does it mean, analog? It means that there is a kind of continuity, and it is actually linear connection between the beginning and the end. Yeah, this is analog. It is, in philosophical terms, you can say teleological, telos. Have we spoken about telos yet? Did we? Yeah. You remember telos? Yes, Maria.
For example, dreams, they have an analogical languages, and it is not linear in terms of...
Why do you think dreams are analogical?
Because they communicate through images. Images in terms of... They are not numerical.
No, they are not numerical.
So we can analyze, but in terms of perception by the individual, it's not numerical, so analogical. It's an analogical thinking.
Look, I think, wait one second. I think the notion of the analog and digital does not apply to dreams.
There is a philosopher who does that.
Maybe. Do you remember the name?
Paul Vaslavic is the one who wrote also "We Cannot Non-Communicate," the first principle of communication.
Okay. So, well, are you saying that dreams are digital? Analogical. Okay, and photography?
Probably.
Okay. Let's.
It's an image.
If you don't mind, I would like to not to get into the question of dreams at the moment. We will get into dreams because we're going to look at Freud. But at the moment, I think it will be just one step too far. What I want to suggest is I just want you to get a sense of what are we talking about when we talk about the analog, and then, yeah, definitely, by all means, try to apply that or relate that to whatever things you are working on, and to dreams as well, Maria. But let's first understand what do we mean by analog. When we say that something is analog, we mean that there is a continuity between the starting point and the end point, and the end point and the starting point are related. So when you plant an apple seed in the ground and it grows and blossoms into an apple tree, there is an analog relationship between the tree and the seed. Yeah? It also can be called a teleological relationship. What does it mean to say that traditional chemical photography was analog? It means that there is a continuity between the negative and all the subsequent prints you made. Yeah? There is an unbreakable lineage, unbreakable connection. Yeah? The print you make from the negative, they don't go wandering in their own separate ways and each one becomes something completely different. They all relate to this point of origin. This is analog. Analog also means that if you are born on the council estate, you will die on the council estate. It means that you have this connection. If you were born working class and you are analog, or you live in this age of the industrial modern society, most likely the bets are that you will go to the factory like your father or your mother. This is analog. Yeah? So don't think about analog in terms of whether the camera takes a roll of film or takes a memory card. Analog means you are now what you were in the beginning. It means change, real change, radical change is not possible.
When I say analog, the word immediately brings to the analogy. So
yes.
It goes towards this concept that they're saying, an analogy.
What does it mean? Okay, that's very good, yeah. So what does it mean? What is an analogy? Can you give me an example of an analogy?
Association.
Sorry?
Association.
But not any association, isn't it? It's not free association. Similarity, yeah. Analogy, very good, very good. Analogy is similarity. It means that the end is similar to the beginning. It means that you are similar to your parents, which might be nice if you have a nice family. But what if you don't want to be similar to your parents? What if your parents live in a, I don't know, in a council house, but you want to live in a tree house? You know, or you want to live in a cave in the mountain. You don't want to be like your parents. Then this analog model is not going to work for you because you don't want to be similar to your parents. You want to be something different. How do you make yourself something different in the analog world? Well, tough luck. You were born too early or too late. Because in the analog world, you have to be similar to where you came from. You cannot be different. Analog model of thinking precludes difference. Does it make sense? Okay, so and what do we talk about when we talk about the digital? What is a digital? What is a digit? Digit is a number. Digit is also a finger, by the way, you know, we have 5 digits on the hand. But digital also means, again, we go back to photography. What is a digital? What does it mean to say that this is a digital image? It means that it's made with numbers, and that also means that every number can be changed. Yeah? So here we have an image. Here we have a digital image. In this digital image, each point of color is a number. I can open this image in Photoshop or in any kind of, even in a text editor I can open it, and I can change every number to another number, and I can completely change this picture. Yeah? So then it's not analog anymore to anything. Yeah? It is digital because it can be completely different. Do you understand? It's kind of, it's very handy that you are photographers or artists, because this is a key philosophical concept and key political concept of what makes change possible. And you have really hands-on experience of that in working with images. Yeah? With the analog image, changing it, of course it is possible, but it's a pain. It's difficult, you know? Yes, you can dodge and burn, you can mask, and you can do various little tricks, but ultimately your print will be analog to the negative. You cannot move. You know, if you have a negative of a house, then you can make it darker, you can make it lighter, you will not be able to print it so it becomes a flower. Yeah? And if you do, then it will be a kind of such an extraordinary level of montage that it will actually show how difficult it is to do it. Yeah? But if you have a digital image of a house, it's not that hard to make it into a flower. You just change every pixel until you get what you want. Yeah? It might take some time, but it is just simply a mechanical procedure. Does it make sense? Yeah. Now, if you want to be, if you don't want to be like your parents, what would you rather be? Analog or digital? That's right. If you want to change your life, you need to understand the difference between analog and digital. Otherwise, people will always come back to you and say, listen, we know where you came from. We know who you are. You cannot do these things. You cannot be an artist. I think that everyone who chooses to be an artist somehow chooses to be digital. Because this is change. This is difference. This is how you break free. Yeah? So, Deleuze is saying, we go back to the text, that the shift we are inhabiting right now is the shift from the analog society in which if your parents work in a factory, you're going to work in a factory, to a shift to a society in which things are much more flexible and changeable. And he calls it a system of variable geometry, the language of which is numerical rather than analog, which doesn't necessarily mean binary, and enclosures, the enclosures of modernity, such as the hospital, the barracks, the prison, the family, the school, they are molds. What is a mold? Anyone knows what is a mold? Anyone here been using molds?
Something you can cast something into and then...
That's right. Yeah. So what is a mold? A mold, let's say if we take... That's a mold. Yeah, great. So this is a mold. Let's say we pour hot wax into this mold and we get this shape. We can do it many times. Yeah, it is the same mold. Yeah. Now, people can also be molded in exactly that way. There are many educational systems that make their aim to mold people, children, through education, so they all will look like they came out of the same mold. Okay. Now, Deleuze is saying enclosures are molds, distinct castings, but controls are modulation. What is a modulation?
Changing.
What is a modulation in music? Anyone here sings?
The vibration.
Can someone demonstrate modulation to us?
Slight change.
Can someone sing a modulation? Can someone modulate a note? Again? But can you do it like that? Great. Yeah. This is modulation. This is modulation. Now, so we are absolutely clear. Can someone here hold a note, like a B flat? Can someone just hold a note? Great. That, okay. Excellent. No, did you hear it? Can you do it again, please? Okay, that was the same note, yeah? In a sense, it's a mold, yeah? It's a note that is continuous. If we wanted to represent it graphically, it would be a straight line like this, correct? Yeah? If we, let's say, if we were writing it as a musical notation, it would be the same note on the same stage, yeah? Okay, could you do a modulation of that note? It's difficult, yes. Let's do it again, please. Thank you. That was fantastic. You can do it very well. Last year it was ding. That showed us the difference, or showed us what modulation is. Do you get the sense of modulation? Okay. Now, your work. Are you working with molds or with modulation? This is a really important question. Maybe both. And when do you think in your work modulation has place or has room?
When something happens that you think, oh wow, that's cool.
Right. When something, when an accident happens.
Or a man on a train moves really nicely, but he never did that every day you get the train.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know his name.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or maybe when you are working with something that is in constant changing. For instance, you can start in some way, but you don't know where you are going to finish.
Good, because one thing which is very clear about modulation is that it is changing. The single note is constant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the same. It's changing over time, but it is within itself is the same. Modulation is both changing over time and is changing in relation to itself. Yeah? So again, it's this same old question. How change happens? How to make change present or inhabit your work? Well, modulation appears to be one way of doing that. We only spoke about modulation now in relation to sound. But Deleuze draws our attention to the difference between a mold, which is a template, basically a template, something fixed, something that you can make many copies of, or a negative, a photographic negative is a mold. Yeah, I take a picture with my Kodak camera and I have a negative, it's a mold, and from this mold I can make many identical prints. There will be no modulation between these prints. They really all refer to the same, they're all analogous, they're all analogies of the negative. Yeah? There is no change. Alternatively, it is possible to imagine a way of working photographically that makes room for modulation. How will you do that? Well, you need to have a strategy for that. You need to understand how you can introduce change or modulation into your work. Now, do you want a quick break?
Yes.
Yes.
Can we really make it 10 minutes? So I want to say 5 minutes and be here in 10 minutes. Yeah, but not in 15 because we need to go to the set. Yes, we can do now. Do you want to speak to me while we go downstairs to get coffee?
Yes.
We are back and we are reading Gilles Deleuze, Postscript on Controlled Society. Let's take a look at the next paragraph where he talks about salaries. Could someone read to us? This is obvious. Someone who didn't read before. Ben, could you? Yeah. We'll come back.
This is obvious in a matter of salaries. The factory was a body that contained its internal forces at a level of equilibrium, the highest possible in terms of production, the lowest possible in terms of wages. But in a society of control, the corporation has replaced the factory, and the corporation is a spirit, a gas. Of course, the factory was already familiar with the system of bonuses, but the corporation works more deeply to impose a modulation of each salary in states of perpetual metastability that operate through challenges, contests, and highly comic group sessions. If the most idiotic television game shows are so successful, because they express the corporate situation with great precision.
Stop here for a second, because I think this is very kind of clear and direct. So, you see, the whole essay progresses by means of identifying instances where change is taking place, which in a sense addresses your point, Vishal, from the beginning. I mean, how do we know that actually change is happening? So we looked at the hospital, and now we look at the question of salaries. So Deleuze is saying, in the fact that the way the society of production was organized, the way the society of the factory was organized, the principle was very similar. Well, it was very simple. How to get the worker to do the maximum of labor for the minimum of wages. Yeah, that was the equilibrium. The employer or the factory owner wanted to pay the least amount of wages to get the maximum output. And of course there is a delicate balance, because if you pay too little, people just drop dead, so that's not so good. But if you pay too much, then it eats into your profits. So how to find exactly the right level of payment that keeps people alive, turning up to work, not also going on strike, because that's also counterproductive, but not more than absolutely necessary. So there is all the time this continuous negotiation between the workers' union and the factory owner about precisely that level. And while the factory also had a bonus, let's say, for someone who makes extra effort or makes another pair of shoes, in the current system of control, the factory is no more. If you look around London, there are no chimneys, factory chimneys. There are no more factories. What factories are replaced with? Corporations. And corporation, as Deleuze is saying, is a spirit, it's a gas. What does it mean? Well, it's not a site where you go to work. It's like a concept. You know, they often revert, when they talk in the news about fighting with Daesh or ISIS, they always say, you cannot bomb an idea. Well, first, you can't bomb an idea. But that's not the point. The point is that the corporation is a kind of idea. Yeah, it's a concept, it's a gas. And what does it mean to say the corporation works more deeply to impose a modulation on each salary? In the parlance of the British employment system, it's called PRP. Have you encountered PRP? Performance-related pay. Performance-related pay means how much you take home in the end of the month depends on your performance. So it's not like you are at a certain salary grade and then you know that you're taking home £1,000 a month. Your salary is depending on your performance. So you have these annual meetings with your line manager, your objectives are agreed upon, and your salary is depending on how well you match these objectives. So it is modulation. Yeah? This is a form of control. Do you understand? Yeah? But this control is not surveillance. It's not about the floor manager with a clipboard making sure that everyone is producing, 20 pairs of socks an hour. It's because that was the disciplinary society, the one that based on surveillance. This is much more modular, tailored to each individual person. Everyone has their own individual agreement and challenges, contests, and highly comic group sessions. We call them away days. Well, maybe you were saved and you didn't have to experience these forms of corporate entertainment. But it is very real. And what kind of television game shows do you think Deleuze has in mind? Television game shows that are popular because they so well describe the corporate situation. The Apprentice, of course, The Apprentice. But also Dragon's Den. Yeah. Does it make sense? Do you see what? If it doesn't make sense, then let's see the next sentence. Timo, can you carry on? The factory. The factory. It is the last sentence.
Yeah. The factory constituted individuals as single body to the double advantage of the boss, who surveyed each element within the mass, and the unions who mobilized the mass resistance. But the corporation constantly presents the brashest rivalry as a healthy form of emulation, an excellent motivational force that opposes individuals against one another and runs through each, dividing each within. The modulating principle of theory according to merit has not failed to tempt national education itself. Indeed, just the corporation replaces the factory, perpetual training tends to replace the school, and continuous control to replace the examination, which is the surest way of delivering the school over to the corporation.
What do you hear being said here? Martha? Martha? Yeah. You mentioned something earlier about that. Do you have any thoughts about this?
Maybe the fact that you're not analog anymore, you're not fixed, you do not know when it's ended.
That's right.
It's a constant process. It's
constant process of training. Yeah, this is very interesting. So first, salary according to merit, not according to experience, not according to training, but according to merit. And also, and how this approach, how the corporation invades education, which is very interesting and not irrelevant, because you know that the university is a corporation. UL is a registered corporation. Yeah. So, and not long ago, we received communications that students are now customers. You are not students anymore. You are consumers or customers. What that means, it's anyone's guess. We're not entirely sure. It maybe means that you are not here to expand your horizons, to learn about the world, to learn about your soul, but you are here to make sure that, you know, the product you paid for will be delivered, you know, in the same way that a double tall mocha latte is delivered in Starbucks, you know, with sprinkles on top or something. That is the overlap between education and corporation. Perpetual training tends to replace the school. Yeah? Perpetual training means that there's always another session on the horizon. You know, you're always going to be trained in something. And that is a form of control. Continuous control replaces examination. And I think while I'm not that familiar with the British school education, from what I hear, it seems to me that it is really a system of continuous control. It is this continuous preparation for exams. And in a sense, education is replaced by perpetual preparation for the O levels, the A levels, GCHE, and all these things. In the disciplinary societies, one was always starting again, from school to the barracks, from the barracks to the factory. While in the societies of control, one is never finished with anything. I want Timo just to ask you to read these two sentences I highlighted here.
The disciplinary societies have two poles: the signature that designates the individual, and the number of administrative numeration that indicates his or her position within the mass.
And the next one.
In the societies of control, on the other hand, what is important is no longer either a signature or a number, but a code. The code is a password, while on the other hand, the disciplinary societies are regulated by watchwords, as much from the point of view of integration as from that of resistance.
Okay, so in the disciplinary society, in the society of modernity, of production and factory, you were an individual and you were designated by your signature. You sign the contract. Yeah? You sign the check. Your signature is unique, is individual, and what is important, your signature is an analog of you. It's like a passport photo. Yeah? It's a proof of your individuality, of your identity as a single person. In societies of control, what is important is not longer the signature or a number, but a code, which is a password. So here we move from society that is based on managing individuals to a society that is based to managing data. You are not longer a person, you are data. What does it mean to say that you are data? Do you know what is data shadow? No. Data shadow is all the data or information that is accumulating about you in the cloud. So for instance, every time you use your contactless card or your Oyster card to go into the tube, there is a record being made. And these records accumulate, and if you go to your TFL website, there are hundreds of them records of all the places you've been. This is your data shadow, yeah? And your data shadow will also have a lot of information about places you visited online, about searches you have made. It can be terrifying. This data shadow is you. There is no need anymore to survey you visually. There is no need to observe your physical body wherever it is in space, because the data from your mobile phone knows it is possible, it would be possible for each one of us to trace exactly on the map where have we been last week, or today, because the phone is continuously sending information back and forth, not only when you make a phone call. Yeah? So all your whereabouts are already recorded and can be brought to bear or brought to witness as required. So that is, you see, this is not a question of optical surveillance, this is not a question of visual surveillance, it's a question of data. Now here I want to stop and just to talk to you for a second about the significance of that. Photography was, in the 20th century, perhaps the dominant form of general communication, because it was, in a society that is based on visual observation, photography was the means by which this observation is taking place. In a visual society, photography was king. In a visual society, the society built on having eyes on someone, photography was king. Now we are moving to a society that is based on data. The question is, this optical device that we call a camera, that is really a form of vision, does it still have the same gravitas? Does it still have the same weight? Deleuze is saying, no. Visual systems are now less important. Systems of looking, of surveillance, of photographing are less important than systems of data. That's what's happening. So, as artists, you might want to ask, is there still any point in making visual images? Marcel Duchamp was wondering about that in the beginning of the 20th century, and he was saying that, well, he was saying the painting or the photograph, they belong to the past. They don't shudder the retina anymore.
Also concerning the signature.
How?
Because it's not necessary anymore.
You don't need a signature. That's right. Yeah. Why? Because you type your password. Yeah. Yeah. And you know when
As an artist, I mean, you don't necessarily have to signature your art.
to sign your work, you mean?
Exactly. It's becoming irrelevant.
It is becoming irrelevant because the whole question of ownership has a completely different meaning when the work is online. Yeah, queue in Napster or torrents. Yeah, is that what you have in mind? Yeah, yeah. You used to sign the work of art. Yes or no?
Yeah.
You used to sign the work of art. Yes.
I was gonna say, I was just talking about this earlier, how like the significance of the signature has just disintegrated. Last night, like I have an American bank card that requires me to sign for it, and every time I use it in this country, people don't believe that I am who I am.
Yeah.
And this woman made me sign my signature 3 times last night, and just swore up and down that it wasn't the right signature. And it happens to me constantly.
Yeah, because now it is almost, I mean, when was the last time you were asked to sign a document to prove, as a proof? In the past, every time you would go through the supermarket checkout, you would sign your name. Yeah?
Can I just interrupt? Because
Yeah.
this is really interesting. Going into the Department for Work and Pensions to sign up on the dole, we now introduce where you don't need a person, but you come in and sign on the machine. Now, so they're relying on your signature to be 80% accurate. So you go in, you have to sign 7 times. And then you go in every day in order to get the dole. You just need to come in and sign that you are active in that. So whilst it's becoming sort of irrelevant and irrelevant in us, the DPD are relying on that. So imagine I come in, I've done like 7 signatures and they're all different because my handwriting is changing. And if something doesn't match, the system is made in such way that it's against me.
Yeah. And also, you know how they say if you get a delivery these days, and you normally are given this strange machine with a screen and the back of a little pen, and you scribble something, and it says nothing like your signature because there's no very big mark. You know, but it's almost closer to a fingerprint. You know, the whole notion of the signature that you. I remember as a child, I probably spent most of my school years trying to hone my signature into something that I like the look of. It's kind of it's the lost art of signing your name. Yeah, but it has, of course, as you were saying, implications to questions of copyright. To questions of, that's not how identity is being established anymore. That is the point. The ways to establish, to trace or identify or align, let's say, a document with a person are not based on a signature. Yeah?
I was just going to say, but I see that in the next sentence he's talking about individuals.
Yeah.
In a way that when we're talking about individual and the difference between like proving your identity or mass data or this data collection and this concern about, oh, okay, they know everything about me, is, I think this is also irrelevant in the sense of it's not about being known, everything being known about you, but how this data collection has a completely different purpose. It's to survey certain behavior and then to kind of pinpoint only to one part of you. So the system is not concerned about you as an individual, but a certain behavior that is ingrained in you that can be used and exploited for whatever purposes.
So can you read to us this sentence?
The numerical language of control is made of codes that mark access to information or reject it. We no longer find ourselves dealing with the mass individual pair. Individuals have become individuals, and masses, samples, data, markets, or banks.
Great. Now, let's talk about, because this is such a good point that Dario made here. Individual. How do you understand the word individual? What in means? Huh? And cannot be divided. In, cannot, individual, divide. Individual, undivided.
Isn't that something analog?
Exactly. I was just about to ask whether it is analog or digital. Individual is analog. Because analog is undivided. The end and the beginning are the same. They are analog to each other. Individual is solid, monolithic. What other words we have? It's a kind of constant entity. As an individual, I go through life unchanged. I might change my clothes, I might get older, but essentially I am the same. The same signature that I invented for myself as a teenager is the same signature that identifies me in my old age. This is my individuality. Indivisibility. Right. That belongs to the age of modernity.
And just make this connection, if like your PIN is your new signature and your signature doesn't change, where with like passwords for certain websites you have to change every so often.
Yeah,
so
very good.
You're no longer, I don't know if you're no longer
individual. Because the password, the signature, and Derrida, if you are interested, Jacques Derrida writes quite beautifully about the notion of the signature. But the signature is like a photograph. Yeah, it's just like in saying that the photograph of your face allows to identify you with certainty because it is analog to you. Yeah, the signature is also an analog on a different level. But the signature is an index of your presence. Only me can make my signature. You will not be able to make it. You might try to fake it, yeah, but then it will be a forgery. Yeah, but the signature, if there is my signature on the piece of paper, it means that I was there available to sign this piece of paper. Yeah, it is a proof of my presence. But we're not talking about presence anymore. We talk about data, and as Ben was saying, the password can be changed. In fact, has to be changed. And the numerical language of control is made of codes that mark access to information. And that is pretty advanced. I mean, it's pretty amazing that Deleuze can say that in 1990. Yeah? Or reject it. We no longer find ourselves dealing with the mass individual pair. So this is the individual and this is the mass. This is the collective, this is the workers' union, and this is the workers. There is something else at work. Individuals have become dividuals. It means that this notion of the, and what is individual? I like to think about the selfie as a way by which the individual is explored. What is the difference between the selfie and the portrait, let's say, or a self-portrait? In a self-portrait, whether it is by Rembrandt or by a lesser author, it doesn't really matter. In a self-portrait, I record my individuality. So you have this wonderful self-portrait of Dürer. Do you know? Okay, yeah. So here is an individual, if there ever was one. Yeah? And it has a signature as well. This is an individual. Now, on what level the selfie is different. Not only on the level of, that takes 40 years of training to produce, and the selfie perhaps a little less. But it's, the selfie is really about how in every environment, in every circumstance, you are something else. Yeah? What is you is individual. It is itself constantly changing by circumstances, environment, context, relations. And that's why once you start making selfies, you have to carry on. It's never one self. Yeah, because what you actually record is how the self itself is different every time. How there is no self. Yeah? How the selfie I will take with you now and the selfie I will take downstairs, or let's say on the fourth floor with my colleagues from administration, each one is a different me. Yeah? So that's one way we can look at the notion of the individual. And I think maybe the selfie is the first art form of the individual. If the self-portrait is the modernist form by which individuality is celebrated, the selfie is a celebration of individuality.
Maybe there's another example of this individuality, or it still have to be the art form, but it would be any kind of online advertising, like Google ads or social media ads. It kind of really, if you do it, you absolutely can get this text, because it kind of really works with this individuality. It doesn't really matter who is accessing the website or who is clicking on this ad. There is this kind of, I would turn on a Google ad and then every 20 clicks, there would be a save made. And it doesn't really matter who these people are and how they get. There is a certain component in them that this ad triggers something, and it needs this mass of 20 so that you make one save. And it works like a clock, which means that this, and this is how the whole data is being employed and processed, and in a way kind of completely moves away from the visual. Nothing is there visual apart from someone looking at this ad and reading, but the whole system of how it works, it is completely devoid of the visual and it kind of, you can, like, if you turn on the ad, you can see who's accessing it, who is, which group page, whatever, like this marketing segment. But it also,
like Google Analytics.
Google Analytics and AdSense.
Yeah, AdSense, yeah.
Like, yes.
Oh, no, sorry.
I did have something. I was just thinking about in terms of like signatures to passwords, and how obviously a signature is something that is meant to make people feel secure because they think that nobody can reproduce this signature, and how passwords are obviously something that anyone can reproduce whether they just know it or not.
Yeah.
I think that like, as far as the like panoptic society where we're trying to sort of train people into moving towards passwords without feeling this fear that somebody can go and like steal our identity is a way that they sort of try to train us as the person who actually has the passwords aren't allowed to know the passwords. They use like hashing in a way that like Google doesn't know your password, or they're at least not supposed to know your password, and all of these entities are supposed to not actually know your passwords, making you feel like it is individual. But the truth is like these like hash keys can easily be broken. I'm sure Google can find your password if they really wanted to. But it's sort of, I just noticed like the link between us trying to train people into feeling comfortable into this new change of society.
Well, I think you're right, and I think probably one of the reasons people get into so much trouble with passports is that they still think about them as a digital signature, but it's not a signature. Okay. This notion, yes.
When we talk about the notion of an individual, considering that a lot of us kind of cease to exist in the physical realm and more existent in the virtual world, you would then have multiple perceptives, multiple realities of yourself, of who you are as a data spot or who you are as an individual on the internet, so, right? So you could exist as an individual, you could also exist as an individual.
That's right.
At the same time.
Yeah. You are saying that the old models are still here, and there are also new models. That is correct, and that's exactly what marks this transitional period. However, something happens to the notion of the individual when it is also individual. Because online you can have several identities. Some people have a very stable online identity that's been persistent for years. Others have different identities and different avatars for various environments. Anyone here is using Second Life?
Used to.
Used to. I think it has a bit of a renaissance. It's actually quite interesting now. It's a bit post-apocalyptic. But I think it's worth going back there, because some of these notions of what does it mean to exist as an individual, you can really see that happening in quite powerfully on Second Life. So what he says here, perhaps it is money that expresses the distinction between the two societies best, since discipline always referred back to minted money that locks gold in as a numerical standard, while control relates to floating rates of exchange, modulated according to a rate established by a set of standard currencies. So here is another example. In the past, in the industrial age, and when Marx was writing about capital, money was linked to the gold in the vaults of the Bank of England. So in the past, in the old pound notes, they would even have an inscription that says that the Chancellor of the Exchequer guarantees this note for the value of that much gold. And you could go to the bank and say, can I have my gold, please? And you would get the equivalent of the paper money. The value of this piece of paper was determined by the gold the country has in its banks. Yeah, that was called the gold standard. Yeah, so the money was basically like a signature, or like a sort of a shorthand. Instead of carrying with you a sack of gold bricks, you had a piece of paper. But this piece of paper could be converted to gold at any moment. And that's why you could buy things with it, you could sell your labor for it. Do you understand? That was the basic idea of the paper money. Now, around Second World War, at different times in the United States and in the UK, the gold standard was abolished. Basically, it meant that this piece of paper in your pocket that says £10 note is not equivalent to any particular gold value. So that was a sort of transitional period after the Second World War. However, in 2008, after the big financial crash, a new thing appeared that is called quantitative easing. And what does it mean? It basically means that the Bank of England can print as much paper money as it wants, because it doesn't represent any value whatsoever. It is purely now symbolic. Yeah, there's no asset behind it. Yeah, it became it's pure speculation. While in the past, the paper money was connected to certain assets, either in the form of gold or in the form of resources or whatever. Now it is just pure abstraction. It's speculation. I think Dario will be able to explain it much better than me. But what Deleuze is saying here is that control relates to floating rates of exchange modulated according to a rate established by a set of standard currencies. In other words, it is pure speculation. Yeah? Is it something in the ballpark? The old monetary mole is the animal of the spaces of enclosure, but the serpent is that of the societies of control. Here Deleuze is bringing a kind of image from the animal world. So we have from the world of, let's say, music, we have the single note, the B flat, and the modulation. Yeah, the analog single note and the digital modulation. And now we have the mole. You know the mole, the animal that bores holes, yeah, which are kind of molds, enclosures, and the serpent. The serpent that just coils around and sort of, moves in this kind of modular way. So the serpent is digital, the mole is analog. Okay. Now, Dario, can you also read the next hierarchy?
The disciplinary man was a discontinuous producer of energy, but the man of the control is undulatory, in orbit, in continuous network. Everywhere surfing has already replaced the older sports.
This is good, no? This is good. So what does it mean? How do you understand that? The disciplinary man was a discontinuous producer of energy. Discontinuous means not continuous. It means individual. It means analog, singular, producer of energy. Yeah? But the man of control is in the continuous network. You are a nodal point in the network. What do you produce? What do you produce? Well,
but when he speaks of man of control, is he talking about someone who can be controlled? Or who exists in a controlled environment?
He talks about existence in an environment of control, in a controlled environment, as opposed to a disciplinary environment. So we have now three periods: the medieval or the royal period of punishment or inquisition, the modern period of discipline, and the postmodern period or digital period of control. Yeah? He says we are not living anymore in a surveillance society. We exited, or we are exiting the disciplinary society, and we enter society of control. That might sound like a subtle difference, but once we start to observe how it manifests itself in medicine, in education, in family, in finance, in art, we realize that the shift is very deep. And the question is, why are we reading this? Because the question is, if the society we are inhabiting now is really moving away from discipline to control, then how should our art change? Can we still approach art as if we are modernists? Can we still afford to be modernist artists? Whatever that means. Maybe if we keep working as modernists, signing our canvases, believing in the power of the original, believing in the copy to be an analog of the original. People sometimes say, I only work in science series, I made 5 prints from this negative and then I destroy the negative, so I have these 5 precious prints. Well, guess what? This way of thinking belongs to the age of the analog, the modern art world, and the modern art market economy. Now, you might want, instead of having 5 signed copies, to have your work on Twitter. Maybe that is a more appropriate way of dealing with this changing landscape. Maybe not. But the landscape is changing, and the tools and the way we make art also needs to change. And if it doesn't, we might become obsolete in the same way that the signature became obsolete.
But I mean, there's been a huge resurgence of 16mm film.
That's right.
It's insane. Loads of people.
And vinyl.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And people go back into the darkroom. But it's interesting that this return to 16mm film, the return to even the cassette tape and the vinyl, not the VHS yet, but I'm sure the VHS will be resurrected as a particularly sexy medium. Is when we return to these forms, we return to them all, but we are already different. Yeah, we are not the same. It's not. It's the individuals who return to these forms. Yeah.
So it's a nostalgia for the individual.
There is, of course, massive nostalgia for the individual and massive mourning for the loss of our individuality. You know, every change is accompanied by mourning. You mourn your lost childhood, even though the adulthood might be an exciting place to be in, but you still mourn your childhood. You will mourn the end of this course. Yeah? And of course you mourn, not because it's such a wonderful course, but because it will come to an end. Yeah? When things come to an end, we respond to that in mourning. So that we also mourn the loss of modernity, the loss of production. There is a massive nostalgia for the way things used to be. It's true. Yes.
We talked about change, like you spoke about three sort of periods, right? Like from the age of royalty and the existence of a disciplinary man, and now man existing in a controlled environment. There would have been outliers to all of this. Right?
There would have been?
Outliers, basically exceptions to this.
Yeah.
So in the age of the royalty, there'd be people who revolted who would not sort of fit in. And that the same part, my concern more is that what he says here, when he says the disciplinary man is a discontinuous producer of energy, I don't know, for me it just seems like a narrow
basically what he means, it's a good question. What he means is that what was the role of the individual in the modern society, in the industrial society? The role of the individual was to work in production. Now, of course, not everyone worked in production. Some stayed at home, some were managers, but the overwhelming majority of people went to a factory or to a mine or to an office and their role was to manufacture. Yeah? What my father was doing, my father spent most of his life working in a factory. I'm not working in a factory. A sausage factory, that's a different. that's a different issue altogether. But look at what your parents were doing. It's possible that for many of you, at least part of the life of your parents was spent in some form of manufacturing, even if it meant driving a train. Yeah, but this industrial society had to be made by someone, and guess what? It was us, you know. But what Deleuze is saying, we are not an industrial society anymore. We will come to that in a second. We are not a society that produces, because instead of the factory, we have a corporation. The corporation doesn't produce anything. The corporation manages exchange rates and currencies and shares. So the corporation deals with speculation. Now, we still wear clothes, we still wear we still sit on chairs, we still drink from cups of coffee, and they have to be produced somewhere. And that is true, that production did not disappear. It just moved to China. And we will come to that. Yeah, so it's not that suddenly things just, happen without labor. But labor is deferred. We've created a kind of society here that sort of doesn't labor. What do we do when we get to work? We update our status in Facebook. I'm at work. And that is your work. And that's what you get paid for. You get paid for, basically you get paid for getting paid. That's it. You get paid, and and what is Facebook? Well, you might say Facebook is a kind of leisure activity or some social activity, but it's a multi-million pound corporation. It's one of the greatest industries, and I think last year there were only 2 shares on the American Stock Exchange that didn't sink, and it was Facebook and something else, and another social media company. Yeah, everything else fared very badly. So this is the industry. So when you go and you update your Facebook status, you are at work. Communication, work becomes communication, and communication becomes work. Yeah, your leisure activity might be the most. It might be that you generate more income in your leisure activity than you do when you are working at your day job. Does it make sense on some level? It's very interesting to look at the various political activisms around Facebook. So, for instance, I was at a lecture a couple of years ago by someone from the States, and the argument there was that we should demand to be paid for our Facebook time. Because our Facebook time is work time. We're not doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for the corporation, and we should be paid for it. Yeah. Now, that is just showing you, it's just coming to illustrate that the distinctions between work and leisure don't apply anymore. What you do in your leisure time is actually working for Facebook, or Instagram, or Twitter, yeah, or academia.edu, or whatever. Okay. I want to read a little bit from here. Could someone read? We didn't read yet. Caro, could you read? Can you see it from there? Types of machines.
Types of machines are easily matched with each type of society. Not that machines are determining, but because they express those social forms capable of generating them and using them. The old societies of sovereignty made use of simple machines, levers, pulleys, clocks, but the recent disciplinary societies equipped themselves with machines involving energy, with the passive danger of entropy and the active danger of sabotage. The societies of control operate with machines of a third type, computers, whose passive danger is jamming and whose active one is piracy and the introduction of viruses.
Great, stop here for a second. Okay, so you remember the 3 societies that we spoke about, 3 forms of control, the punishment, the prison, data. Now we have 3 kinds of machines. So the feudal, the monarchy, the old agricultural society, what were its main tools? It was the shovel, right? The plow, the lever, the pulley. Do you know what is a pulley? Yeah, it's a sort of You pull a rope, you know, so pulling, yeah? like water from the well, okay? And clocks, yeah? The mechanical devices of the Middle Ages. Moving on to modernity. What are the tools? Machines involving energy. Yeah? For instance, give me an example.
Computer.
No. Too fast. Steam engine. In the Middle Ages, you would sit at home and you would spin a yarn, spin a thread, and you make yarn, correct? Now, and you know the word spinster. What does it mean, spinster? It's someone who can support herself by spinning, doesn't need to get married, can survive without marriage because knows how to spin. So a kind of form of feminism, a kind of form of autonomy. If you can spin the thread from the wool or cotton, you don't need a husband. You'll be okay. Spinster. Okay. So that's the feudal agricultural society. Modern society, what replaces spinning? Where cotton is made? Cotton mills. Big factories, one of the greatest inventions of the Industrial Revolution, were these factories where you could produce cotton on a grand scale, conveniently matched with the slave labor that produced the cotton. Yeah, but that we believe it's for another day. Now, so in this society of machines, the danger was that the machine can be broken or it can be sabotaged. What is sabotage?
Purposely breaking a machine.
Sabotage, it's from what word it is? It's a French word. Mouse. Sabotage. Isn't it from a shoe?
Yeah.
Shoe. Because people would just take their wooden clog, take their wooden shoe and stick it between the teeth of the machine. Stick it in and the machine will jump. That's how you sabotage, by sticking your shoe in. That was the danger, right? So, that was the industrial age. That's why it had to be a disciplinary society. You had to stop people from breaking the machines. How do you do that? You have the supervisor, usually on the kind of balcony above the workers' floor, making sure, looking there, that no one is taking the shoe to stick in the machine. Okay? Right. Moving on, the postmodern age, or the age of information. We leave the industrial age, we enter the age of information. We don't have machines anymore. What replaces the machines? Computer. That's right. Now, with the computer, try to sabotage that. You know, where are you going to stick your shoe? In the printer? Another form of sabotage is possible, which is what? The virus. Hacking. Yeah. So these days, if you really want to be disruptive, you better learn coding. You know, if you really want to be efficient as a saboteur, if you really want to cause havoc, you will not do it by just not turning to work or going on a demonstration, because nobody really needs you at work in the first place. The worst thing that will happen is that your status on Facebook will get updated. But if you learn how to create computer viruses, if you learn how to hack, that's how you can still disrupt the system. And that's why earlier Deleuze was saying you need to look for new weapons. The old weapons of the clog in the machine not going to help. The old classical weapon of the workers going on strike is not that effective anymore if there is no factories. So you go on strike. So let's say the tube operators union goes on strike, okay, millions of people have a very uncomfortable day, taking them hours to get to work, true. But so what? So some computer terminals remain not switched on, because those who really make a difference, they don't go by tube, you know, or they work from home, or they go by helicopter, or by Boris bike. Yeah. So it's not that effective, and that's why, at least over the last few decades, workers keep losing, and many of the conditions the unions managed to acquire in the past are now being gradually eroded. So, for instance, the right for tribunal, the right to appeal unfair dismissal, and various rights like that the unions fought long and hard to establish for the workers, now being eroded quite easily because the workers don't have the power they used to have. In the past, not turning for work was quite a serious threat. There was this very classic big threat of the universal strike. All the workers in all the professions will go on strike and we'll show you. You know, by the way, why do you think we have things like annual holiday? The weekend. Where do you think the weekend came from? It was not there always. That was the work of the unions. That for over 100 years, through continuous fight and negotiation with the owners or the capitalists, as they used to be called, negotiated various conditions that made the life of the worker easier. In the Victorian era, it was completely normal for children aged 12 to work in factories, and loads of children died and perished there. And the workday could stretch up to 16 hours, but gradually the workday was limited to 8. Why? Do you think because the factory owner felt that it would be better for him or for her if the workers work less? No, because of sabotage, because of strikes, because of because the workers had the power of not turning to work. But as work, or what the worker can do, becomes less important, because the emphasis moves to speculation, it's much harder now to defend and protect these rights. So they get eroded. What should be the response in such environment? That is the question Deleuze wants you to ask. He wants you to understand that the old models of struggle are not as effective as they used to be. Yeah? Just as, you know, in the Middle Ages, you could wear metal armor, and it was effective because people fought each other with swords and arrows. So you could wear loads of metal on you, and that protected you. But then gunpowder was invented, and the bullet fired from a gun could easily penetrate your metal armor. So people don't wear armor anymore. Yeah, you have to have new weapons and new forms of defense. So, in the present situation, who could read it to us? Ben, could you read this?
But in the present situation, capitalism is no longer involved in production, which it often relegates to the third world, even for the complex forms of textiles, metallurgy, or oil production. It's a capitalism of higher order production. It no longer buys raw materials and no longer sells the finished products. It buys the finished products or assembles parts. What it wants to sell is services, and what it wants to buy is stocks.
How do you understand it then?
Well, corporations, it's corporations creating, one example that comes to mind is like Apple they come up with these products. The parts for the products are made in China. They're assembled in China, I think. And then you pay for the phone, but you're paying for the contract for the phone.
Exactly. And what does it say on the phone? It says, designed in California, assembled in China.
Yeah.
Donald Trump wants to change it.
Yes, sorry. What else? This is a shift from industrial capitalism to what kind of capitalism? How would you call it? Service capitalism, that's good. Maybe information capitalism. Maybe speculation capitalism. Capitalism no longer involving production, because production is outsourced. Yeah? Which it often relegates to the third world, even for the complex forms of textiles, metallurgy, or oil production. See what is happening now in Africa, for instance. It's very, very interesting. It is a capitalism of higher order production, meta production. It no longer buys raw materials and no longer sells the finished products. It buys the finished products, or parts, as you were saying. What it wants to sell is services. What it wants to buy is stocks. This is the corporation capitalism. Yeah? So none of us is in production. All of us are somehow in services. Yeah? And the corporation is a speculative organization. It deals with shares, with stocks, with investments. Yeah? Okay. Now and this is very interesting. So this is just directly silly.
Even art has left the spaces of enclosures in order to enter into the open circuits of the bound.
How do you understand that? This is the only sentence when Deleuze speaks about art. We need to expand on it a little bit. What, let's say the age of modernity, what is the classic form of art? Describe it to me. Where art is being made? In the studio. The studio is like the factory. The studio is like the hospital. Art is being made in the studio. Where art is being consumed or exhibited? In the gallery. So you have the studio, you have the gallery. Who is making the art? The artist. And who is the artist? He is the great big individual, like in the Dürer self-portrait. Yeah? The individual makes art in the studio, and it goes then to the gallery, and then to the New York apartment of the buyer.
Through the art dealers also?
And through the art dealers. And you know, they used to say that only art that fits into the lift of a New York apartment sells. Anything that is bigger than the lift or the elevator doesn't sell. So that was the modernist approach to making art. Okay, how is it different now?
You speculate on art. You speculate on it.
You speculate on it.
A lot of buying of art actually happens much later. You actually speculate on it as a commodity.
But let's go step by step. What is replacing the studio?
Computer.
Exactly, yeah. You can sit in Starbucks and make art. You don't really need a studio. You really don't need a studio. In fact, perhaps it's good to somehow step away from the studio. And where art is being consumed?
On the computer.
On the computer, online, on the internet. Now, of course there are still private views, of course there are still galleries, but somehow you can see it's a bit like with the hospital. There are online galleries, there are online curated spaces, there are Twitter accounts, and there are artists who never exhibited in a brick and mortar gallery and still are very well known. Yeah? Look at Richard Prince's work with Instagram, for instance. It is an interesting example of a sort of hybrid event that is both online and in the physical space, but to a very large extent, it's a kind of way of making art which is completely not studio-based and not that much gallery-based either. Yeah? Have you heard of the Google Art Project? You can go to the Google Art Project and you can look at paintings at much greater magnification than will be ever possible in the gallery. Yeah? And it is all on your computer. In a sense, kind of quite astonishing. If you've never looked at the Google Art Project, I suggest you check it out. What does it mean to be an artist in the age of the individual, when you don't sign the artwork anymore? So, of course, people often talk about the end of art, but it's only the end of the modernist art as we know it. It is for us really to reinvent art by figuring out what form of art practice corresponds to the society of control.
Why art has to be put in dialectic to the society?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Why art has to be put in dialectic with the society? I mean,
put
in dialectic. So
did I say that?
In dialectic with the society. Dialectic.
Did I say that?
No, I mean, if we think about how.
Why should art correspond to
society?
So
in relation, in terms of the.
Well.
I think that art has always been part of the society since. No.
Of course.
So
yeah.
Because it is the core of almost everything. You know? For instance, the Renaissance, all of them worked with the society.
Do you remember how in the beginning of the last semester, when we looked at this essay by Lyotard, Representation, Presentation, Unpresentable, Lyotard put forward this argument that the Renaissance painting, the perspective of painting, corresponds to the political organization of society at that time. The single point of view, yeah? Remember, we spoke about it, but in great detail. Yeah. So there is, how do you make art that is relevant? Now, you might come and say, art doesn't need to be relevant. That's kind of, I think, fine. But let's say you want to make art that is relevant, that is speaking in a language that is somehow resonating with what is happening. Yeah? I mean, what else can art do?
Also, if it wouldn't respond to society in any way, it would be individual again, and then there's no point in even showing it.
Yeah, and also because you are part of one society, for one specific society, so you are going to work, your ground will be that society also, because you were raised in that space. So that will have traces of that. Your art will have traces of that. It's impossible to separate your work from one society or from one point of view or from one culture.
It's an artist to have necessarily a politic orientation.
Not necessarily, but indeed it will have part of that. You know, even though when you are not thinking in doing something about to talk about politics, that kind of things, it will have.
Everything is political.
Yeah,
everything.
You can separate it.
Poetry is not ever poetry, for example.
Isn't poetry art?
Yeah.
What?
Is poetry not art then?
Who knows?
Okay, if
Is
not,
photography art?
but if not, then where would it exist? If it did not exist in relation to society, what are the other options? Not one other option, but what are the other options?
But in this way we are...
Where else would it exist?
I mean, in this way we are following exactly the panopticon. We are slave of the society. No,
Well, okay.
we'll never
if we don't conform to the panopticon, where would art then exist? What is the realm that it would exist in? It would have to. How do you make sense of art? By relating to something that you understand, right? If you have to make sense, if you have to comprehend it or understand it, you would have to relate to something, a knowledge, information, something, right?
I relate in the things. In the thing of
How do you know how to relate it based on what you've
I
learned?
don't have to relate. For example, I do this.
Okay.
Yeah, but,
To give a meaning, I say this is made by plastic and...
How do you know what is plastic? You've learned, right? You have information.
Okay.
Information comes from the society you live in.
Yes,
right?
but I'm not being like an extremist in this. I mean, in terms of message and concept, not in terms of material. But I mean, if I do these things with two elements, I say these two elements are the thing.
Okay, so does this now exist
but it's
in
not
relation
this
to society or
because
not?
I want to go against the recyclable and blah blah blah.
No, so now does this exist in relation to society or not?
It exists, but not by the person who has done. Like the art, it can be, it exists in terms of politics, but it's not the artist that put himself. I think I have this view. Please contradict me. The artist does something, no, and the things could be political, but not necessarily the artist has to have the political intention, because I think in this way it follows probably exactly the system. It doesn't go out of. It's like the worker from 8 to 5. It's the same things. He's an artist, but he's the same.
But Marilu, at the same time, you are absorbing all your knowledge from this society and from this political system.
And
So
that's
it's
a right
impossible to
question.
separate your way of thinking from that kind of things, because
This is
you
the
are not
challenge.
an individual. You don't have. You are not purity. You are not pure. You know. Because you are absorbing all the time new knowledge, and that comes from other people, from independent society, from a different culture, from whatever part, you know. So that in that way, your art is part of this political system, of this society, of this culture. Even though when your point is not is nothing related to talk about some political issues or political culture or blah blah.
And once you
that is the hiding behind your work, you know.
And once you question that, it becomes political. Everything you do is political.
I think it's because you see the word political with different restrict meaning. I think we intended to be more like,
if you talk about
expanded on society and many things, that it's not just the political like the exact meaning that you can find in different vocabulary. It's like, as Julia say, is more like raising a question is a way of doing politics, because you raise a question and you have this question. It doesn't have to talk about politics and the way the society is constructed by rules and politics or going against it. It's more like, even like raising a question about life that doesn't speak about politics in the societies, is about societies in the same way, because it's raised from a person who lives inside societies and experience society. Do you get me?
I think one way to think about it is that art is not that different from other forms of making. Artists are makers. And just like people who make clothes or shoes or automobiles are makers, so are artists. They are making things. But as the nature of making itself is changing, and as we see, the hospital is changing, and the prison is changing, and the industry is changing, and the finance is changing, so is the same change can be also be made visible or be identified in art. Yeah? And therefore, the question it becomes an interesting question. How do you survive as an artist in this changed environment? Do you still put your faith in the studio system and the gallery system and hope that that will carry you through? Or you say, in this new changed world, I need to have another way of working?
I don't know. I think the only possibility I can think of is if a person existed alone outside any known society, just by himself or herself, the person just existed, whatever they made, would it still be art?
Read this sentence here, the highlighter.
Man is no longer man in clothes, but man in debt.
New form of prison. You remember how we said earlier? Foucault's most provocative statement was to say, wherever you are, school, barrack, hospital, you're always in a kind of prison. Deleuze comes and says, there is a new form of prison now. It's not called panopticon, it's called debt. You as students should know very well what that means. This is the new prison. You as an undergraduate student, you graduate with 40,000 debt, 6,000. I think now they're going to raise it to about double it. Yeah, this is the new form of prison. Yeah, this is the new form of discipline, the new form of control. And the next sentence, Vishal.
It is true that capitalism has retained as a constant the extreme poverty of 3/4 of humanity, too poor for debt, too numerous for confinement.
This is really good, don't you think? It is so sharp. It is true that 2/3 of humanity are still in extreme poverty. Too poor even to be in debt. Too poor for debt, because you will not get a loan if you are really poor. And too numerous for confinement. Yeah. Okay. And control will not only have to deal with erosions of frontiers, but with the explosions within shantytowns or ghettos. Pew in Syria and what the misleadingly called Arab Spring, and you get the picture. So, I think we can stop here because it was a long session. I think you're doing very, very well. I like the conversations you have between you around the stage. Okay, we're done. Thank you very much.